Today, we're diving into an absolute masterpiece of Tang Dynasty poetry. We're talking about just 4 lines, 20 characters, penned by the legendary poet-painter Wang Wei way back in the 8th century. It's this incredible little poem that uses one tiny object to unlock a whole universe of human emotion. So let's get into it and uncover its secrets together.
And that's really the big question here, isn't it? How can something so small carry so much weight? We tend to see objects as just, well, things. But what great art does, and what this poem does so brilliantly, is transform something ordinary into a kind of portal, a direct line to our deepest feelings of memory and connection. For the poet Wang Wei, that portal was a simple red bean.
So here it is. In Chinese, it's the Hongdou, but it also has this other even more poetic name, Xiangsi Zi, which you could translate as the mutual longing seed. And that name is completely tied to this profound feeling of xiangsi. It's a deep, deep yearning for someone you hold dear. And it's not just for a lover. It can be for family or a really cherished friend.
Okay, now let's really experience the poem itself. To get a feel for its original music, I'm going to recite each line first in Chinese, and then I'll follow it with the English interpretation. My advice? Just close your eyes and let the sound of the language wash over you before we get to the meaning.
红豆生南国
Red beans grow in the southern lands.
春来发几枝，
When spring comes, how many new branches sprout?
愿君多采撷，
I hope you will gather many.
此物最相思。
For this thing most evokes longing. Just 20 simple words, but wow, the depth they contain. That's the genius of Wang Wei right there. He uses this incredibly plain language to get at an emotion that is just so layered and complex. So what's really going on beneath the surface of these lines?
Well, it all comes back to this one feeling, song shi. Now, you'll sometimes see it translated as lovesickness. But you know what? That's just way too narrow. Think of it more as the ache of distance. You know that pang you feel in your chest when you're thinking of someone who's far away? That's song shi, and it's mutual. It's a shared bond that stretches across any separation. So let's look at those first 2 lines. The southern lands, that's not just a spot on a map. For the poet, it represents the sheer vastness of distance itself. That's where his friend is. So when he asks how many new branches sprout, it's so much more than a question about a plant. It's this tender, personal thought that basically says, hey, I'm thinking of you, and I'm thinking about your world, which is so, so far from mine. And then, I love this part, he uses a very specific verb, 采撷, which means to pick or to gather. He's actually asking his friend to do something, to physically reach out and collect these beans. It's this beautiful invitation to take a passive feeling, like missing someone, and turn it into an active, physical act of remembrance. He's basically saying, hold this, and when you do, think of me. And then we get to the absolute climax of the poem, 此物最相思. This thing most evokes longing. The key word here is 最, which means the most, the ultimate. The poet is flat out declaring that of everything in the entire world, this one tiny red bean is the #1 symbol of their bond. It's a physical anchor for an emotion you can't see, making this deep feeling of xiangsi something you can literally hold in the palm of your hand.
Now, for centuries, this poem has been linked to this beautiful but really tragic love story. But this is where things get really interesting, because the popular legend and the actual history tell 2 very, very different stories about what this longing was all about. So the famous folklore goes like this. A wife, waiting for her husband who would never, ever return from war, cried until her tears literally turned to blood. And where those tears fell, red bean trees grew. It's this incredibly powerful story of undying romantic love, and it's why so many people assume Wang Wei's poem must be for a lost lover. But history tells us something else. See, the poem has another title, Presented to Li Guinian on the River. And Li Guinian wasn't a lover. He was a famous court musician and a very dear friend of Wang Wei's. They were separated during the absolutely catastrophic An Lushan Rebellion, a civil war that just ripped the Tang Dynasty apart. So this poem, it wasn't about some mythical romance. It was a quiet, heartfelt message to a real friend who was lost somewhere in the chaos of war. And this historical detail is it's incredible. Li Guinian, after fleeing south as a refugee, would actually perform this very poem set to music. And the audience, many of whom were also displaced, grieving their homes and their families, would just weep when they heard it.
the poem became more than a poem. It became an anthem for a whole generation scarred by war, a shared expression of loss and a deep, deep longing for a time of peace.
So, does knowing the true story take away from the poem's romance? Not at all. Actually, I think it deepens its meaning immensely. It shows us that this powerful feeling of Xiangsi, this profound longing, isn't just for lovers. It's bigger than that. It transcends any single type of relationship.
When you get right down to it, what we learn from Wang Wei is that he captured a universal truth by focusing on one specific detail: a red bean for a friend. He reminds us that the deepest kind of longing isn't just about romance. It's for our friends, our family, our lost homes, and for moments in time we can never get back. This poem is just a timeless testament to how the simplest thing can carry the weight of our most powerful emotions.
And that really brings us full circle, doesn't it? The reason this poem endures is because it speaks a truth we all recognize in our own lives. We all have our own red beans. You know, an old photograph, a certain song, some simple little object that just instantly closes the distance between us and someone we miss. So I'll leave you with this question to think about. What's yours?